Should the use of force to make criminals appear in court be allowed? Get your calls in now. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, is proposing tougher sentencing rules that would let prison guards use force to make convicted criminals face their victims, including gagging and restraining them physically. Labour is trying to push through a law, but Keir Starmer hasn't specifically said he's willing to greenlight the use of force to achieve this. It's at the judge's discretion to use force, but there's no specific law to enable it. And they can use contempt of court laws to extend the sentence of those who don't comply. So, what is wrong with using physical force to get someone into court to face justice when that person may have committed terrible, brutal atrocities against their victims? Yes.
Well, you've answered your own question. There are two reasons not to do this. One is, this is still just, sometimes I think, a civilised country. We don't restrain and hold and act violently towards prisoners, or shouldn't do, and shouldn't ask prison guards to do so either. But the second thing is, imagine the heinous crimes that will have been committed, and the victims then faced with somebody who didn't want to be here, who would, I'm sure, act up and draw attention to himself. Imagine their psychological trauma, because this guy didn't want to be there, and it is mostly guys, I have to say, not always. Lucy Letby refused to appear, remember? So there are two reasons. You know, do victims really want to have this guy who's angry as he comes into court to remind them of what he did? Isn't that just showing the jury, the press, everybody that's assembled exactly what they're dealing with? Isn't that exactly what court is to do, to actually expose the perpetrator to justice, understanding the impact, the consequences of what they do, and allowing the court to see what they're dealing with? And we have contempt of court. If somebody is prepared to do why don't we
then
just
they face
use
a longer
that?
sentence.
Extend the sentence, absolutely extend the sentence. OK? You can do that. If you don't appear in court, the judge will extend your sentence. And I don't just mean the contempt rules. Extend it substantially. OK. That's what I would do.
I don't think that's enough. And I think, in answer to your question, I think a lot of victims, it helps them to know that the perpetrator of the crime is there not just to hear the sentencing, but usually during that sentencing period is the victim impact statements and those sorts of things. And a lot of these horrific criminals don't attend those either. And that means that the victims don't get to air their grievance and how horrifically their lives have been affected in front of the perpetrator. So I think that a lot of victims would want that. But secondly, I absolutely think, fine, I think gagging them is going too far. And let's be honest, I don't think this would ever happen. This is Robert Jenrick trying to out-reform reform. But the principle of them having to be taken there and dragged kicking and screaming, we do restrain prisoners. We put them in handcuffs. We restrain them in all sorts of ways. But I do think taking them to court, having them there to be accountable for their actions and forced to do so. In many of the cases where an extension of the sentence would normally be seen as effective, you know, if you look at someone like the Southport killer, if you look at that horrific Crossbow killer, I don't like naming them because they're so awful, but we're talking about the killer of John Hunt's family. Yes, right. The horse racing commentator. Let's name the victims just so we absolutely remember. That's Louise, Carol, and Hannah Hunt. Yes, and again, that person is not going to say, well, my sentence might be longer, so I'm going to turn up to court, because they're going to be in prison for the rest of their life.
They would just act up. They would be performative. They would show they would show how horrible they are. But how does that help a grieving victim? They're not going to listen to the victim statement and feel moved by it. We know that Olivia Pratt-Corbell's mother has campaigned long and hard to make sure that her daughter's killer had to listen to the impact statement. That's what she wanted. She wanted him to understand the consequences of his actions and saw that as a crucial part of the judicial process, which is I completely agree with that. My objections are using physical force to make them appear.
But it is part of the process of putting them in prison, as Cristo says. That force is there, whether we see it or not.
I think I think they would really act up. They would really take away, actually, that sense of justice, make the families more upset, is what I'm worried about.
I think that victims, I don't actually think it's about whether they listen to what the victims are saying. It would be great if they did, but I don't think it's about that. It's about those victims just being able to say it in front of them and almost get that, you know, that American phrase, closure. But they've said, right, I have said my piece. Whether they've listened or not, I don't care. At least I've said it in front of the perpetrator.
Also, impact statements, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, come usually before sentencing.
Yes.
So seeing the response of that perpetrator to the impact statement would be something surely that the judge could take into account when they are sentencing, because we know impact statements can have an impact on sentences.
Maybe. I'm open-minded about this, but I feel that it would be more upsetting for the survivors.
OK, let's get some calls in. Diane's in Northumberland. Diane, do you think that courts should have the power to force perpetrators into court to face justice, to see sentencing and impact statements?
Definitely. The first of their punishment, to have people staring at them and hating them, and I don't care how they get them in, drag them in by the hair, I don't care. They're in there for the most vile crimes that have ever been committed, a lot of them who don't want to come in.
Diane,
I would get them in by hook or by crook.
Diane, what about if that means that we are sinking to their level? If we are acknowledging these crimes and the idea of a civilised process which respects humanity is pushed to one side, and in some way we're almost as brutal as they are?
No, I don't agree. They don't want to come in because they're evil, vile cowards, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it.
Well, I mean, they are once
I
they...
would want to stare at them and let them see how much I hated them.
OK. I'm going to throw...
Because they're not human.
Well, I'm going to throw you an idea here, Diane, is that actually they are not guilty. They are innocent until proven guilty. So throughout that process might eventually prove that there was a miscarriage of justice, that they weren't guilty until they were innocent of the whole thing. And then we treated that person like an animal.
Well, we'll just apologise and say, I'm very sorry. But how did he get into court in the first place? There must have been some kind of show of what they've done.
Well, I mean, that we have a history...
I'd rather somebody apologise to me after the event than not get them in there at all. OK. Thanks for your call, Diane. We'll take another one. Marion's in Glasgow. What do you reckon, Marion? Is it acceptable to use force to get people in front of the judge, in front of possibly the victims whose life they have ruined?
No, I don't think so, simply because it'd be very harrowing for the families. They've already been through a very harrowing situation, and to see that would make it much worse for them. My thoughts on the subject are that for every minute of the court case, I'm taking numbers out of the air here, but say for every minute of the court case, if they don't turn up, 1 month would be added to their sentence. There would be no reprieve for good behaviour, so they're forced into actually turning up. They would still have to hear the victim impact statement at some time, either through something in their cell or coming through and letting them know. And also, the last caller, you said to the last caller, innocent until proven guilty. That's absolutely fine. If they are innocent, they wouldn't have to go through this process. They wouldn't have to go through being kept in jail for an extra 10 months or having no reprieve.
OK. Cristo...
Marion, would that make a huge difference, though, with someone who is inevitably has been found guilty of a crime that means they're never going to leave prison? Extra time on their sentence is not going to make a difference in that case, is it?
I'm thinking of the family situation, because it must be absolutely harrowing beyond belief for them to have gone through what they've gone through.
But that's
and for this person...
Can I say something? Lucy Letby didn't appear, OK? Are we saying she should have been gagged and restrained and brought in? Now there are all kinds of doubts being thrown up about the case itself. It's a perfect example of what you brought up.
OK, she was convicted and sentenced.
And there is a huge campaign to re-examine the evidence. Should she have been gagged and restrained and brought in?
I think gagging is going too far, I do. But I think, yes, you should be. There are cases, I think, I just was looking it up, and I think there are cases actually where the judge can direct that a defendant is forced by reasonable force, it's called, to come into court. So I think she should have been forced to come into court.
Let's take another call. Thanks for your call, Marion. Chris is in Bristol. Chris, do you think it's a valuable thing to have somebody in court, a perpetrator, in court, so that they can face justice by any means that is possible?
Yeah, most criminals, they know what they're doing, so you're going to do the time, so get on with it. It's all part and parcel of what you've got to do. And when you've done the crime, you've been sentenced, whatever, you kind of owe it to the victim in a way, but that's me personally. But regards to forcing people, years ago, I'm talking back in the 90s, for instance, they open your cell door at 7:30. Come on, Mr. How you got court? I'm not going. Yeah, you are. You're not. I'm not going. I'm not going to court.
So this is your personal experience, Chris?
This is a personal experience.
So
right?
you were charged with a crime and you decided not to go to court?
Yeah, I decided that morning. It's something simple. I needed medication. I can't hear you, mate.
OK, so you didn't go to court. What was the outcome of your case? Were you convicted?
No, they forced me. They actually come in. They lock everyone at 7:30 in the morning. They come round, and then they open the door. I can't hear you again, mate.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you, Chris.
Right.
Keep going.
So this is how it went. 7:30 in the morning. Door opens. There's two of you in the cell. You're both ratty because you don't want to go that. And right. So basically, I don't want to go to court. So 4 prison officers come in the cell. They restrain me, don't gag me or put me in headlocks or anything. They've got special ways of doing it. Then they usher you down into the reception, take you to court, and that's it. By the time you've gone out of reception, you forgot all about it. But the prison officers haven't got the means to do that now. So my suggestion is, if someone doesn't want to go to court, right, they're not going to get extra days because they're a lifer, but they've got to live in that establishment, in that community. So say, Mr. Smith, you ain't going to court now, so all these boys on this wing, or the whole prison, they ain't having no association.
Was it the judge that made the difference? The judge said, bring him in by any means possible.
No. It's down to the prison service. And now the prison service is run by, I'm not going to be disrespectful, but years ago we used to have ex-army and things like that. And they were like firm and fair. Nowadays, you could go boo to them and they'll jump off the boat. The prisoners run the prisons.
OK, listen, so we're going to have to leave that there, I'm afraid, Chris. That sounds like Chris's experience is of a time gone by when actually the rules weren't quite so keenly observed.